Hello, my name is Jeremiah Kidd and I live here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I also have a business called Isidro Permaculture. We focus on rainwater harvesting, greywater reuse, edible landscaping, erosion control, and other permaculture related scopes of work. I'm just here at my place showing you around today. We're going to be looking at the black and greywater reuse system. Welcome to my place. Me and my family built this house about 15 years ago. Some of the considerations that we took into account for the black and greywater system was how many people are using the house, obviously, what's the demand, and also how could we reuse that water to grow food, right? Or support species for wildlife habitat or other benefits. There's two options. One, you can kind of split the greywater from the black water. So you have to double plumb the house to have the greywater lines go separate from the septic system. And we chose the other option, which is to have it all joined together. So you save some of the plumbing in the house, right? So you don't have to double plumb between what's the black water, which is the kitchen sink and the toilet, from the greywater, which is everything else in the house, the laundry, the showers. So we have all of that water going together into a septic tank. And then in that septic tank, we have a treatment system that uses lots of space, like corrugated plastic, which provides a lot of surface area for beneficial bacteria. And then we pump oxygen into the tank to change it from anaerobic to aerobic system, right? Giving oxygen to those bacteria and then inoculating the tank with that beneficial bacteria to clean up the water, that black water, into greywater standard that we could reuse in the landscape in the irrigation system. So we have two different irrigation systems. One is black water that we treat up to greywater standards, and I consider that kind of a fertilization system because it has lots of nutrients. We also have a rainwater harvesting irrigation system that we use for more of the vegetables and as a backup to the fertilization system. That was one consideration, is we could save on some of the plumbing going with a whole house system. We also would get more water, right? Because then you get the flushing toilets, you also get the kitchen sink, and so we also can capture that water into the greywater system as well. Another thing that was real appealing to us is that we're basically using the greywater drip system, the fertilization system, the greywater from the house, as also like our leach field for our septic. We can count the drip system in the landscape as part of our overall size of our leach field. And so then that allows us to reduce the size of a conventional leach field that you would have after a septic system. So that saves a lot of plastic. In our specific location, we're on a gentle north-facing slope between my neighbor's road and a drainage behind the house, the arroyo. And so we were kind of stuck where we could build on this lot. And so we had to make the best of it and have our landscape in the front of the house, which is slightly uphill. So for our system, we had to rely on a pump to pump that water up to the landscape because we are tight to a drainage in the back, and so there wasn't much room for the landscape behind the house downhill. We opted for the pumped system, but then we are using solar PV panels to pump that water. That was kind of a unique situation that where we are, that we had to use a pumped system, but we promote gravity in a greywater system to be able just to be passively irrigating the landscape as much as possible. Every site has its challenges. The house is a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bathrooms. So when it's full, that produces a fair bit of water, even though we're using low flow toilets. We have 2 showers, 1 bath. And we don't take baths that much, but it still produces quite a bit of water for the landscape. And so we're in an arid part of the country, and so we need to really make every drop count. And then also it's really beneficial to be using those nutrients, right, that are going through our body and that we're coming off of our body. So in using those, transforming those nutrients into fertilizer for the landscape. The wastewater flows through the septic tank. The liquids are on this side, and this is the side that we do the treatment in. We have the beneficial bacteria here, and then we pump oxygen to create an aerobic situation for the bacteria in this side of the tank. That helps clean up the water and get it up to greywater standards. The water then overflows to a pump tank, From the pump tank, we draw the water out and filter it here. And then we can decide which zones that the gray water is going to. I typically prefer putting most of the water to the edible landscape, but I can also choose to add some to the native trees around the house as well. We always have these zones as big loops. So we send the water out to the landscape, 2 or 3 terraces, and then it comes back into the system here so that we can always keep those loops clean by pushing water through them. And we return the water back to the treatment tank for another round of treatment. So this box here is the pump control. If it gets too cold, it won't run the pump. And it also controls the float. Basically, when we use enough water to fill the pump tank, which is about 300 gallons, then a float turns the pump on and pumps that water out to the landscape. When the pump tank is getting empty, then the float goes down and turns the pump off. The Blackwater Greywater system is controlled by how much water we produce in the house. So that depends on how fast you use water. So if the tank is about 300 gallons, if you have a lot of people, that might be just 2 or 3 days. If you're being very conservative, that might only run once a week or once every 10 days. That often isn't enough water to totally supply the needs of an edible landscape. My other backup is the rainwater harvesting irrigation system. This is the controller. This I can set it to run every other day or every third day or whatever. Typically I'll set this to the driest time of the year in the growing season. This Climate Logic gets the weather from the Wi-Fi and also gets information from this sensor that detects rain. This is a rain sensor and a solar radiation sensor. And so if you set this to like the driest time of the year, the hottest day that you can imagine, then this will back the time down. So if you have a zone set for 1 hour and it's dry, but it's a little cloudy like today, then it might only run 50 minutes instead of 1 hour. Or if it rained yesterday, it might just skip an irrigation cycle. That's some of the controls for the rainwater harvesting system. This is where the graywater lines return. So we have all of the graywater zones of drip be big loops that return, so they never have a dead end that could get clogged up. So they return back to the system and return to the treatment tank so that they can keep the drip lines flushed and also possibly get a secondary treatment. So this is an aquatic air pump that pumps oxygen into the treatment tank. The Blackwater system needs oxygen to feed our bacteria, right? We're supplying oxygen to the bacteria, they're cleaning up the water. Once the water goes through the treatment tank, it goes into a pump tank. And from the pump tank, we pump it out to the landscape, first through this filter to make sure that we don't plug up any of the drip system. And then I can choose which zones they go to. I can adjust here how much pressure I have in the drip lines, because each of the drip zones might be of different elevations. And so you kind of get this happy medium of pressure. You want the pressure of the drip system between, 20 and 30 PSI. So once our black water is turned into gray water with our biological treatment in the back of the house, we pump that water up to the front edible landscaping. We have bamboo, raspberries, josta berries, Nanking cherries, all kinds of perennial edibles in this area. So one zone is these 2 terraces. It irrigates this close zone 1 area to the house and the second terrace. And then another loop, or what we call zone of the graywater system, services the 2 upper terraces. And those upper terraces have apricots, apples, nectarines, peaches, plums, pears, cherries. So that's kind of the upper terrace. So in this area, we have 2 different graywater zones that are fed by the house wastewater system. We wouldn't be using the graywater to grow vegetables that you might not cook. So anything that's raw or wants to be eaten fresh, you don't want to use graywater on. So the graywater is just for our perennial landscape that we're either cooking, or is a perennial food or fruit that we get off of a shrub or a bush. One challenge is just the elevations of our site. It's downhill, so we had to actually pump the systems instead of just gravity. So that was one challenge. When you travel, then you need to be able to have the system be fed. You either need to have a house sitter or someone come and add nutrients to the system to keep that biology alive. There is some maintenance as well. So once a year, I take the chamber that houses all the bacteria out and clean that and then re-inoculate with new bacteria. So there is some maintenance to the system. And then I typically do drain the system in the coldest part of the winter. We're at almost 8,000 feet, so it gets quite cold here. So I'll typically drain the system from about middle of November till the end of February. The air pump keeps going and the bacteria keeps living, so they're still cleaning up the water, but then that water just goes into a typical drain field or leach field. But one benefit is that at least it cleans the water up to keep your drain field from getting clogged up and also just being cleaner water going back into the soil. So another challenge of the system that I chose is that it does use electricity. It needs a pump, right? And I decided to go that route, but then to supply the electricity for the pump with solar panels. And in New Mexico, we get abundant sun and solar radiation, and so our house is all powered by photovoltaic power off of solar panels. If you can afford that power use in your energy budget, then that might be the way to go for you.